And after an unexplained, sorry everybody, hiatus, we are back. Ella, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Rested, recovered, right? 100%.
Yeah. I think we probably owed everybody one last rugby championship episode that we never got to. So sorry about that, everybody, but life just kind of got in the way.
Welcome to the life of people trying to create content but hold down full-time jobs.
Yeah, not easy. Yeah. Getting married next year as well, which has really kicked into gear in the last couple of weeks. So I've been super busy. But Coast to Coast is back. They can't stop us.
No.
They can delay us for a little while, but they can't stop us. So yeah, what's going on with you?
You know what? It's been a large couple of weeks. We've obviously concluded the Rugby Championship, but the rugby world doesn't let you take a break. We moved pretty quickly into WXV. You guys obviously up north moved into your domestic competitions with the NPC happening here. And now suddenly we're nearly back in international season again. So I feel like I've barely caught my breath. Like what is it? Like a duck paddling with its legs underwater.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're here. I feel like there's enough rugby up here to talk about something for at least 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think so. How is there much like excitement for November? Is it building?
Well, I don't know if there was huge amounts until obviously everything erupted with Rico, Ioane, and Johnny Sexton. I think that really added a layer. I think it's been quite a low-key build-up into that Japan test, which is coming in just under a week. I think as well because the Rugby Championship squad, there wasn't much change from the Rugby Championship squad to the end of year tour squads. There wasn't too much to kind of sink your teeth into, probably more around the All Blacks 15, which is a bit more of an interesting team.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a bit of a low-key entry. I think people are also a little bit scared about it all. So yeah, what about on your end?
Well, it's like we've talked about. You guys have the toughest Northern Tour possible, right? You're playing all the big teams, and it seems like reality is conspiring to create subplots for every single match with the stuff that's going on in the media. But yeah, up north, it's been all go, right? Like URC started, premierships in full swing. So much rugby. It's been exciting, and I think this week was the last week that all the international, certainly in the Prem anyway, that all the internationals played club rugby. And so I think next weekend everyone has a bit of a rest, and we're into November.
And we're cracking into it. So do you want to
give me? There's a lot of hype up here.
Yeah,
people are really excited. I think because there's a perception that the All Blacks that might be a bit more beatable with a new coach and a refreshed squad. And then the fact that like England have South Africa and they beat them last time they played them at Twickenham. So, and I think as well, definite World Cup semi-final revenge on people's minds. There's some confidence. I think people think they can have a go at them.
Yeah, it's huge. They're very tantalizing matchups. You couldn't write much better.
No, as a neutral, I can't wait for New Zealand, France. Do you remember that before I think it was the November before the World Cup, the game in Paris, where Ntamack ran from his own try line and then they almost scored. Like that's one of the best games of rugby I've ever seen. I'm just praying we get something like that again.
I mean, we've been treated, haven't we? Like throughout the international season, we've had some absolute blinders, like classics, all through from July onwards. Six Nations.
Test rugby's never been as good as it is now. Like from the World Cup as well. Like I was talking to my dad about it yesterday, actually. Some of those games are, you go through the whole tournament. I mean, obviously pool play, maybe not so much, but the Ireland-South Africa game from pool play, and then all of the quarterfinals. England-Fiji, obviously not as high quality as the rest, but super exciting. And then the one dud was New Zealand-Argentina in the semis. But other than that, every game was like so tense and an absolute classic to watch. Like we've been really spoiled over the last year. It's been amazing.
I love that Argentina All Blacks game. That was a classic.
Oh, wow.
So do you want to give me a bit of a 411 as someone who lives down here at the bottom of the earth? What are kind of the headlines happening in Northern Hemisphere rugby at the moment?
Well, some exciting stuff that's happened. In the Premiership, we'll start there. Newcastle, who went the whole season last season without winning a game, finally got their first win in since 2023 anyway, against The funny thing is everyone's like, yes, Newcastle. The story is poor Exeter Chiefs, who made a European quarterfinal last year, are now bottom of the table, haven't won in 5 games, and they are the unlucky team that Newcastle got the win against. But like, they've been going for such a long time without a win. They usually get like 5,000 fans down to their stadium to watch the games, and just so made up for the people who go out. Newcastle's up north in England too, so it's cold, it's wet a lot of the time. So people who brave that to go and watch a team lose every week massively deserved to go and see something. And it's just a great good news story.
Are they one of the clubs that vaguely have been tied up in all of the like financial difficulty? Have they been on the brink, or have I got that wrong?
So yeah, kind of. But they made a call to drastically cut expenditure. And so like, where other clubs are going out and signing, big names from abroad. This summer, they signed a player called Sammy Arnold, who really, really good centre, but not like a marquee name. But he was their highest profile signing, and they've promoted a lot of youth players, and they're trying to run the club sustainably. I think they've got, honestly, you hear like anytime like a financial person talks about what rugby needs to do, they say trim the wage bill, live sustainably, live within your means. Newcastle are like the poster child for doing that. So from their perspective, once promotion relegation comes back in, they're going to be one of those teams that's maybe always on the edge. But I think the way they're structured, the club won't implode if they get relegated, and they'll be able to come back up, and everything will be healthy. So yeah, they know what they're doing, And
that's a good news story for the week.
That's one.
That's one.
Yeah. What else is going on? URC's been great to start with, actually. Leinster look amazing. If I was a Munster fan, I'd be sick. Snyman's probably already played more games for Leinster than he did for Munster in 2 years, and he looked amazing last night. But yeah, honestly, the main story overall is just like so much good rugby, so many good games, and I think everyone's just chomping at it for November, because I think all the Northern Hemisphere teams fancy they can do something. Even the Welsh regions have looked a little bit better at the start of this year.
Did Scarlets just get a win that I saw?
Scarlets beat the Bulls this weekend. Like, amazing. And I don't know if you saw any of the highlights, but the winning try, I'm blanking on his name. I think it's Rogers. Sorry for the player that I'm missing, but he sat down Curtly Arnsah and Caden Moody to score the try. So like,
oh, I did see this.
Yeah,
and I saw
pretty impressive.
Imagine Rusty's voice notes to those.
Yeah. Yeah. So amazing to see. Like, and there's been a lot of chatter as well about leagues merging and the future of club rugby in Europe. So it's nice to actually just get on with some games and just enjoy the sport. But how about you? What's going on? What's going on the other side of the world?
It's been an interesting couple of weeks. I think, NPC is in a really great place in New Zealand. I think it's been an awesome season for them. Some great rugby. We've just had the semi-finals. Waikato lost to Wellington. So Wellington beat Waikato to proceed to the final.
Is that TJ Perinara beating Cam Roygaard? Am I right there?
Oh, that was the week before in the quarterfinals.
Was that the week before? Okay.
Yeah. And then the other semi-final was Canterbury Bay of Plenty, and Bay of Plenty won. And that's, I think, the first time they've been in a final since like 1976.
Oh, wow.
There's a wild story coming out of the Waikato. I encourage you to check it out on social media. There's a young guy playing for Waikato. His name's Ollie Mathis, and he's like really young, and he's a flanker. But a couple of weeks ago, they were short on players. I can't remember whether it was at the end of the game, and he had to play on the wing. And he was so good that now he is playing on the wing. He is starting games on the wing. And he scored an absolute worldie over the weekend. So that's been an awesome story. We love a verse. That's like really changing a utility back, isn't it? Like that's or a utility player.
Yeah.
So that's very cool.
There was a French club that used to have a guy who could play number 8 or on the wing. I think it might have been Clermont back in the day. You love it when you see players like that.
Wild day. So cool.
Yeah.
And like creates a great narrative. So yeah, the final will be next weekend. Bay of Plenty and Waikato. Bay of Plenty and Wellington. Wellington have been top of the table, but I'd love to see Bay of Plenty do it. They just, against Canterbury, it was, I think, 13-8 or something at halftime, maybe 2 Canterbury, and then Bay of Plenty just came out and had like a worldly second half. They've got a lot of sevens players in their team, so they're a very exciting team when they get going. So that's huge. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, big news out of Australia. Joseph Suaalii is finally in camp, the $5 million man.
Yeah.
Signed. I just don't watch rugby league, so I wasn't like super familiar with him prior to him coming over. I thought they were signing like a 26-year-old veteran, of the NRL, but he's a 21-year-old unit. He's so young. So suddenly I'm like, wait, this is really exciting. And he looked the goods in terms of, looked the goods. He just looked very composed and really excited about his opportunity playing Union for Australia. So I think that was quite exciting, and everyone else was really excited about it,
What position is he going to play?
I don't think they know.
Okay.
He's a big boy. He's like 6'5".
He's huge.
He's obviously going to play in the back somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
can't.
The inevitable comparisons are Falau, right? That's what everybody's talking about.
Or Sonny Bill.
Oh, I think, maybe let's go with that one.
I think in my eyes, I would see him as a really great fullback. Apparently, he's a very good kicker. He's obviously a big unit, so that's going to be great under the high ball. But the Aussies are pretty sweet in the 15 department when you think about it, between Callaway and Wright and potentially Jorgensen, wherever he fits in there. So maybe they are looking at him at maybe inside centre. That would maybe require a little bit more time in the game. But I think that's the conundrum for them at the moment, is where does he fit in? I think the understanding is he will be playing for Australia 15 at some point on this Northern Hemisphere tour. So pretty quick ascension. Yeah, absolutely. So
a rare win for Union over League. A rare win for Union over League, right? Like a rare get.
A rare get. I saw Hamish McLennan coming out. He's obviously not employed by Rugby Australia anymore, but he came out in the press this week and said we need to be targeting more league players. He was talking about, probably won't be familiar to you, but Nathan Cleary, who's the gun.
No, I do know him. Yeah.
And he's like, we should be getting all the Nathan Clearys and this, that, and the other. So they don't have the money for that, guys. So,
isn't that the whole problem? Isn't that how this mess started in the first place?
Yeah, honestly. So a rare win for Rugby Union over League and a rare win for Rugby Australia. And it's probably quite nice now that all the talk over it can kind of be put to rest. It's just going to be about the rugby from now on. And I, for one, I'm very excited to see him run out.
They've got a tough enough tour, haven't they, Australia? They're playing Ireland. I know that.
Yeah, I think they might have Scotland, actually.
Let's have a look.
As well. That would be a good matchup, I reckon. Like, I'd like to watch that game.
Yeah, here we go. So they've got
England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, that is difficult.
It's tough.
Not quite New Zealand's tour, but it's tough.
No, and it's not quite South Africa's either.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just gutted there's no South Africa. Yeah, I'm gutted there's no South Africa Ireland game. Like, it would have been amazing.
Blockbuster, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I can't believe we're nearly crossing over hemispheres again. Feels like so long.
I know. It's one of the things I love about rugby, though, is like the setup of the season. To an outsider, it must feel like it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Like, when you get into it, you're like, okay, these are the only windows. I get it. But part of how archaic it feels is a big part of the appeal for me. I really like that.
I think I've seen some of your videos and also reports around about Ireland injuries. Obviously, hooker.
Yeah.
Peter O'Mahony was out for a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, O'Mahony was out. Kieran Ferrari got injured for Leinster yesterday. And like, I do think there might have been questions in the coaches' minds. Like, I think Crowley's definitely the number 110, but Munster haven't been going so well. I wonder if maybe they would have thought about making a change, but if Frawley's injured, then that makes a big one. But yeah, for hooker, the first choice 3 players who would normally start a hooker are all injured. Although, annoyingly, since I made that video, I have seen some people saying that Herring might actually be fit. But either way, it'll be a new face on the bench, probably. But outside of that, like, Ireland's stocks look pretty good at the moment. And plenty of players playing well. You got a lot of fringe players playing well in the URC, like Jacob Stockdale scoring tries for fun for Ulster. And yeah, just so many parts of the pitch. Like, you look in the centres, there's so much competition, so many good players. So I'm really intrigued to see how we do. We've got the Connacht scrum half, Ben Murphy, who used to play for Leinster but moved to Connacht so he could actually get some minutes. Looks amazing. Looks like maybe a good bet for a bolter onto the tour. Shaved head era Gibson Park. Looks like he's stepped up to the next level. He looks amazing. Like it's just exciting. Like I think Ireland will go out and whatever about the results, I think they're going to put together some really good performances on tour. Not on tour.
Whatever about the results.
Whatever the opposite is. Well, no, but you know what I mean? Like we might lose. We're playing against really good teams. We might lose a game, but honestly, you just want to see the team doing great stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be a cool matchup, Joe Schmidt with the Wallabies, obviously.
That'll be really exciting. And as well, like, you know, before the Rugby Championship, you would have looked at the 4 games and said, New Zealand, huge. Fiji, not as big. Argentina, not as big. Australia, because of the Schmidt factor, massive. But Argentina have just gone and beaten all of the big Southern Hemisphere teams. So now that's an absolutely massive game as well. So, yeah, just super excited.
And they've just been playing, I guess we didn't do a Rugby Championship wrap-up, but what a pleasing thing to see Argentina at the upper echelon of Test rugby. Yeah.
Yeah, massively. And also to see them, like, they're really building an identity. Like, you can feel Contepomi putting his stamp on the squad. And I always think, like, if you as a fan can see the messages that are being given to that team, that means that coach is a really clear communicator. That coach understands exactly what he wants. And the players are obviously bought into it because you're seeing it come to fruition on the field. So yeah, super excited to see them.
Maybe that's a real nod to like 10s being good coaches, right? Because obviously on the field, you have to be such a communicator. You have to drive certain things out of the players around you. Maybe we need to do more investigating into the 10 to coach pipeline.
Maybe, but I think Felipe is smarter than your average 10, right? He's a doctor. So maybe it's got more to do with that.
Potentially.
Oh, but yeah, it's just so exciting. Honestly, I love this time of year. November internationals is amazing.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to. I thought I've talked about it a lot. The time zone's been killing me. But some of these are more early morning games, so I can cope.
Yeah, okay, that's good. But yeah, I've managed to get tickets to the All Blacks and to Australia. So yeah, super exciting.
Huge. I didn't realize, I guess because every country, and this is, the unique thing about rugby, that all these unions kind of operate a little bit differently. I didn't realize until this year that Ireland essentially play all their games at the Aviva, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, here, like, the All Blacks will play all around the country. It's just so interesting, the different approaches.
Yeah, like, and a lot of fans don't like that, and I can see why a lot of fans don't like that. And the Aviva is like, it's its own thing. Like it's only slightly bigger than the old Lansdowne Road was. The premium level is too big. Like there's not enough general sale tickets available for all the Ireland games. It's so hard for people to go. But unless you did it in Croke Park, which, the crossover is starting to happen a lot more now. So like maybe that is something we'll see in the future. Previously, we played games at Croke Park while the Aviva was being developed. But I'd love to see Ireland regularly playing in a stadium that's big enough so that like access isn't as big of an issue. And the problem is if you take the team on tour around the country, the access only gets worse, right? The stadiums only get smaller. It only gets harder for people to get tickets. So I can see why people are annoyed that they have to go to Dublin every time they want to watch the national team, but the alternative is less people can go. So it's a difficult one.
Pros and cons.
Yeah. It seems really cool the way they take it around New Zealand, but obviously Wellington aside, seems awesome.
Oh, but the thing with that Wellington test was, are you talking about the Argentinian test that like wasn't sold out?
No, I mean the curse.
The curse, which was like, I don't know if you saw my video. I single-handedly think I am responsible for lifting the curse on game day in Wellington. I went there earlier. I bought some salt. I threw it over my shoulder. I bought my own wood. I was knocking on the wood. I made sure I didn't stand on one crack that day, and the curse is lifted. So everybody, All Blacks fans, you can thank me. It was all me. Nothing to do with the players at all.
No. Coaches, players, get in the bin.
Do we want to touch on, I guess, another big rugby event? Next year is a Rugby World Cup year, people.
Yeah.
And we have had a Rugby World Cup draw. We have the pools, and I think, it's been a big month for Ireland, New Zealand rugby relations, and as an Irishman and a Kiwi, big things are happening. Should I run through the pools and then we can talk about it?
Talk us through them.
Okay. So, Pool A, which in my opinion is the pool of death. Okay. We have the world number 1 and the hosts, England. Then we have Australia, who are coached by a former Red Rose from England, Joe Gapp. Then we have the USA, who on anyone's day, on their day, could knock anyone over. And then Samoa, who are a great team on the rise, but I think it will be quite tough for them.
Yeah.
Then we have Pool B, world number 2, Canada, looking awesome, pushed the Red Roses during WXV. Scotland, WXV2 champions last year, on the rise. Wales and Fiji. I think between those 3, any of them could exit the pool. And number 2, I'll do Pool D and then I'll do Pool C. Pool D is France, Italy, South Africa, and Brazil. I think there's so much that could happen in that pool. France probably the favourites to come out in the first place. I reckon we could see the Springbok women come out of that pool, which would be hugely exciting.
Yeah.
And then
can we just talk about how awesome it is to have Brazil at a Rugby World Cup as well? I love that.
And I think that's what women's rugby has taken quite seriously, especially with, say, WXV. We could see Hong Kong, Madagascar, the Netherlands, Spain, all in one competition, that was really cool to see. Pool C, which is where you and I both come in, we have the Blackburns, we have Ireland, then we have Japan, and we have Spain. So I guess if we kind of had talked earlier, Ireland and the Blackburns have a bit of a difficult history if you're a Kiwi. What was your reaction, I guess, to that game where the Irish beat New Zealand and WXV won the other week?
I had no idea Ireland were close to getting a result like that. You see, I know in the Women's Six Nations, they've had a lot of hope around them over the last couple of seasons and maybe haven't delivered on it. That seems to be the general consensus coming out of it. I don't know the players that well, so I don't want to be making sweeping judgments with not much expertise. But I certainly didn't look at that and think, "Ooh, could be on for a scalp here." I just thought they'd lose that game. Amazing stuff though. And it's the kind of thing you need, I suppose. Women's rugby in Ireland maybe not given the level of priority that people would like, and the way you get people to pay attention is by going out there and getting big results like that and showing people that you mean business.
I felt like my Twitter timeline that day, I obviously follow quite a lot of people who are into women's rugby, but I felt like my For You timeline kind of exploded with people interested in the Irish rugby team that day.
Yeah.
Was that similar to your experience?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'm blanking on her name now, but the 20-year-old, yeah, everyone being star for the future, absolute name made. And that's the kind of thing you need, I suppose.
Yeah, and good timing, right? Right before, I guess, the World Cup pools get announced and World Cup fever kind of starts for any Irish fans who are wanting to maybe go along. Yeah. Suddenly your interest is PK'd, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they will see a big uptick from it because it was all over, in Ireland. We love it when we do well at something. We don't do well at that many things on the national stage. So there will be a lot of focus on it.
Yeah, this is where Ireland and Kiwi, New Zealand, are the same, right? Overachieving on the international stage. So I guess for additional context for people who aren't aware, in 2014, I think the Blackburns had won 3 or 4 World Cups on the bounce at that point. We're coming in favourites, and we played Ireland in pool play, and we lost to them, which was our first ever loss at the Rugby World Cup. But also because of the way the competition was set up, there were only 12 teams, so there wasn't quarterfinals, it was just semi-finals and finals. So it meant that we got knocked out in pool play, the only time that it ever happened, and it was because of Ireland. It's one of the darkest days in New Zealand women's rugby history. And so I think a lot of Black Ferns fans are very nervous to be in a pool with Ireland once again. So I think Coast to Coast Rugby will be all over that in the lead up to the World Cup.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. I definitely need to study up on my women's game. I need to learn some more about some of these players.
Well, I think they're kind of forcing everyone to learn very quickly, They've just put in absolute huge performances.
Yeah. And do you know what? They're doing uncharacteristically for rugby. Really quite a good job of promoting it. Like, you do see an awful lot of noise about it. And it's great to see.
Yeah, hugely exciting as we head into World Cup year. So, and also I believe general tickets go on sale maybe the 25th of November. Or
Okay.
I could have that wrong, and that could be Glastonbury ticket dates. I'm just got confused. We can do some research. I'll put it in the bio.
Yeah, there you go.
Get ready, basically. What else was on our agenda to discuss?
What else? Well, the general. We were saying when we got together before we started recording, there's been so much like off the field news, right? Between the Nations Championship and potential destinations for the Nations Championship. Then we've got all of the stuff around the new law trials, 20-minute red cards. We've got France and New Zealand at loggerheads over the summer tour. Like, there's a lot going on in terms of just, a bit of schoolyard gossip around rugby at the moment. Where do you want to start?
We'll go in the order you said it. Let's do
Okay.
the Nations Cup, because I think you're probably across this a lot more than me, so you can bring me up to speed. And I think it coincides a little bit with the World Rugby chief elections as well, eh?
Yeah. Actually, that's true. That's going on as well. And we've got that Bill Beaumont interview from a couple of weeks ago where he talked about reducing subs and all that kind of thing. So lots going on. But if we start with the Nations Championship, which just seems to be the thing is, overall, I love the idea of like standardized. I know a lot of people say like we're going to miss tours and stuff, but from the fact that New Zealand and South Africa have organized their own, it seems as though the scope is still there. Like, obviously there isn't enough space in the calendar, but on a personal level, I think, and I'm not an expert, but this is just looking from the outside, how I feel. At some point in the future, if rugby is going to survive, it needs a standardized international season and probably a standardized club season. Maybe with like Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere conferences to account for time differences and stuff like that. But like, I don't think it's going to be able to survive long term if there's a million stakeholders and a million competitions and everyone is splitting audience share and there's no way to combine it to try and raise money. Like, I just don't see that ever working. So having a standardized global international league seems like the first step for that, right? And the fact that they want to bring in a second tier and they're going to put all the tier 2 nations in there, and then in the 2030s there's going to be relegation and promotion, like that all sounds right. That's all the stuff that people want to see. But the questions people are asking at the moment is about the finals weekend, where it's going to be held, and the fact that it's come out that it does look like the first one won't be in Qatar, but the second one will be. And to what extent is the sport selling its soul? How badly does it need the money? Because it's £800 million. And, I feel like the discussion around it, there's a lot of moralizing, and there's maybe not as much focus on the bottom line, which, like, if the sport is really on its knees and there's a complete lack of money, they're going to take it from wherever they can get it,
I like the point you raised in your videos, I think, around, because I struggled with, as a woman who, like, if I wanted to go there, to watch this game, or I think about, some of our women referees who maybe are in same-sex relationships, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. That's been the part I struggle with around this. But I liked the point you raised around, but why are we pretending that any money maybe is more moral than the other? And obviously we all know that at a certain point, at a certain level of money, there's exploitation and horrific things happening in order for that to be required. And the All Blacks have a big old like oil and gas situation on the front of their jerseys, same with France. So
well, but also you have private equity stakeholders. Like, where do you think their money comes from? Like, and it's not to excuse. It's not to because the idea of like we don't do business with people who don't align with our values, broadly agree, right? Like that's a good position to stake out, but there's dirty money everywhere.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if I think my the thing I struggle with the most is, the sport washing, that whole argument, what it means to do money there or to do business there. But I think the other thing is also, what is the vibe going to be? What is the travel going to be? Who's going to go? I have questions around that as well. But we could, I think, maybe sometimes rugby's problem is we or as fans and consumers, maybe not necessarily administrators, as we chew ourselves in circles around this sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just also think you see it in, I'm sorry, listeners, we're definitely about to get into this is all going to go twists and turns all over the place. But you see it in discussions about growing the game, particularly online. There's so many people seem to think that just put rugby on free to air everywhere and the sport will get massive. And it's the problem is it used to be on free to air much more in a much more widespread sense. And people haven't gone for it in the same way. And there's a lot of talk about we don't want rugby to be like cricket, like test cricket, where sort of increasingly it's controlled by a couple of big nations and smaller nations kind of get frozen out. But you know what people in cricket aren't talking about? They're not talking about the sport ceasing to exist on the international stage. Going behind a paywall and adopting that mindset within cricket's turned it into a massive money-wise industry. And yes, it affects accessibility. Yes, it makes it more expensive for fans to go and watch. But if you want to have an international sport, you're never going to have it where it's cheap and easy to go to the games and there's not loads of demand. And I feel when we talk about these things, it's so easy. We all do it. I do it all the time. It's so easy to let perfect be the enemy of good and be well, I don't like this particular element of it, so I'm against it. But when you actually try and game it out, the best possible scenario for test rugby is having lots of money and then trying to sort the problems out afterwards. It's not having no money and discussing how we're going to solve the problems,
Yeah, it's such a tough one, and this is why I'm definitely not the one making decisions. But yeah, I don't know. We shall see what comes of it. Sure. Well, it sounds like it's all pretty much locked in.
It feels that way. And it sounds like it'll go to London first for a bit of a soft launch, give people a chance to get used to the idea. Because as well, it's going to take a while to sell the tournament. And the tournament format is a bit weird. Everyone playing against each other in the other conference makes sense. They really want to make it like a Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere rivalry thing. That's going to be the theme of the tournament. And then the finals weekend is wherever you finish in your conference, you play the team that finishes in the same position in the other conference. But it's hard to imagine anybody traveling to Qatar to watch 6th place against 6th place, unless you bundle it and you can go and watch 3 games in a day or something. But even then, who actually wants to do that?
Well, at a stadium, right, where you have to pay for everything you need.
People hardly watch 3 games in a day on TV. I do that for TikTok and I'm exhausted at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah, no.
Patient breath. I think the one thing you can be sure of is they need the money. So it will probably happen in some, might not be exactly what we're being told at the moment. Things can change between now and then. First one wouldn't be until 2026 anyway. But yeah, gonna happen.
And we shall see how it goes. From the comfort
well, yeah, well, I mean, the first one's in London, so I'm definitely going to go to games if I can. But yeah, I can see why people will miss the old tours and the old windows and stuff. But people, when you talk about change, people always overestimate the risk of doing something, and they underestimate the risk of doing nothing and leaving things the way they are. And people don't realize that the same level of risk is attached to just going on the way you've always gone. And rugby has to do something. And if this is going to be it, then, well, this is going to be it.
Is that the perfect segue to move into the 20-minute red card?
Yeah, let's talk about the 20-minute red card.
I don't even know if I want to talk about it because I've just been witnessing the discourse for the last week, and it's been a wild ride, if I'm putting it nicely. We were having a conversation earlier. Yeah, I don't know.
Let me tell you what. Let me tell you how I feel.
Yeah.
So I worry that it will create a new class of professional foul in the game, which I don't think is necessarily the end of the world, right? But I wouldn't like to see that. I do think there is clearly a type of infringement where you see a red card given and you're like, oh God, that's so harsh. And it doesn't feel right. I think some of my reaction to it is probably just that thing of where you're always resistant to change. But broadly, the reason I don't like it is I just wish they'd stop tinkering. Like, I don't know. The other thing is I'm not a player, right? I'd love to see like a vote of elite players across the northern and southern hemispheres. Do you think it's a good idea? Because if the players broadly voted yes, then I'd be all for it. Because like you hear so many differing opinions when you see like a high shot. Sometimes former players, pundits will be like, it's literally a split second. Like there's nothing you can do there. And then other times people will be like, oh, he knows exactly what he's doing. And like, you know, I think unless you've been there, you don't really get to make that sort of a comment. So I'd be fascinated to know how players actually feel about it. And maybe that would be a better way of deciding whether or not we should make these changes.
Should we say that they need to the shape of the game, they need to take all players need to come in for a vote?
I was actually just imagining Ben O'Keefe in my head there because we spoke to him about law trials. And I was just imagining him saying to me, that's what we did. We spoke to a bunch of people in the game and that's how we came to this. So
yeah, they definitely had player representatives there because I know Conrad Smith is there in that capacity. So I imagine they are responsible for canvassing players. Yeah. That's the reasonable assumption, right? But that's an assumption. I also was in the camp of rugby needs to stop tinkering. When will it stop the tinkering? But what I've realized, I did a video on the evolution of the replacement in rugby. And through my research in that, I realized that rugby has always been tinkering.
Yeah.
That has been rugby. You know, like a try used to be worth no points. You used to score a try, but the points came from then you got a try of kicking the ball over the goalpost, and that was where your points came from.
Is that why it's called a try?
Yes.
I never knew that.
Yeah. So obviously that's like hundreds of years ago, but the sport has tinkered, and there's a website that has like all of the law clarifications and amendments and tinkering over the last, like even in just the professional era, but then when you go through, say, the history of like the replacements, they've always been changing. And throughout that time, there's always been concerns about, oh, if we change this, teams are going to cheat and exploit it. Like all the same things that people are worried about with the red card. I don't know if I'm like, yes, a red card is the solution. But I just think the response to it has been wild. And I don't know if that is because of XYZ narrative that exists online about New Zealand rugby, Australian rugby.
I think that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, it's very odd. I think New Zealand is really in its villain era, which like I guess we can lean into. But yeah, I don't know, like the response is if New Zealand and Australia just walked into World Rugby headquarters and said, we're doing this now, as if every other union doesn't have a say, which they do. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a fascinating time on the internet for sure.
It's you saying that though, even makes me reflect on especially the nature of like, I think it's the same on most of the platforms, like whether it's Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram, right? Whether it's text or you're making a video or whatever it is. When you put something out there, it has to have a point of view to get traction with people, right? You got to stake out a position. And listening to you, like everything you've just said there sounds totally reasonable. And it's like the temptation though, when you're making stuff is, and you don't realize you're doing it, but to dig further into the position that you're already in, like that's the easiest thing to do. It's much easier to do that rather than be like, well, maybe there's a broader context to this. Maybe if I did some more research and not just research into the thing, if I did some research into the wider question, you know, maybe I'd learn something. And I just learned something talking to you about it today. So,
well, I learned something too, but, and because I definitely was in that camp of like, come on, it's like the fifth one this year. But I think that's all, and I'm not saying that it's a good thing that rugby has always done that, but it's just like, I don't understand why we're all of a sudden, like this is the line for tinkering, you know? It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I do empathize with the Northern Hemisphere. I saw an article around from, I don't know who it was in the England camp, basically saying like we haven't really had much time to adjust to this, because obviously for the Southern Hemisphere, it's been part of Super Rugby and we played under it in the Rugby Championship, whereas it's not the same for Northern Hemisphere. So I can completely understand that feels a little bit like, ooh. And then I also can agree that perhaps the communication coming out around this law, one of two camps. Either the comms hasn't been strong enough, and so people don't actually understand what the 20-minute red card is, what it actually
That's
entails.
Definitely part of it. Like, I was surprised when I'd make a video about it, the number of people in the comments who thought they were replacing a full red card with a 20-minute red card. And like, I realized I didn't think you'd need to explain that. Like, I thought because we're plugged in, I guess, that everybody knew, but everybody doesn't know. And I think that definitely supports what you're saying.
Some people don't even know that it's 20 minutes and you're off for the game and someone else comes on.
Yeah.
Just use it for 20 minutes and come back on. So yeah, I think the comms maybe haven't been strong enough, but I also think they maybe haven't been strong enough against the already set tide of narratives online, right? Like, it wasn't like they were coming into a neutral place. These were coming out into a hostile environment, so that's hopefully something that World Rugby maybe can reflect on, because it doesn't feel like people are like have come along for the journey on this one. People are shocked by all of the actions.
Again, like, because we're plugged into all that, like, how your average rugby fan, do they hear any of that discourse stuff, or is it just they hear? So. No, I don't think they do either. Like, it's so fun. Like, online rugby as a community is so insular because it's like a minority sport to begin with, and then you've got this tiny group of people who talk about it online, and like, we're all doing our best, trying to grow it, but obviously also selfishly trying to stake out a place for ourselves in that space as well. But I do wonder how much of it gets through. And like, our regular people, and this is the reason I ask, are regular people getting the message from World Rugby filtered through the internet, getting to them, or are people just getting the message from World Rugby, or are people just not getting it at all?
I think a lot of people probably wouldn't get the message until game day from their commentators. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those may be more trusted sites for them. But yeah, I agree. I think, and potentially I think there would be your regular, your average fan who maybe tunes in and goes, oh my gosh, something's changed since the last time I watched. That's weird, and like, oh, I don't know if I like that. But I don't think they get engaged too much in the discourse. And I think it's the same with, certain sections of whatever rugby community saying, well, can't you see no one wants this? And it's like, well, actually, I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah. A bit of projection there, maybe.
Yeah. So, no, it's been a very interesting time. I guess we'll see how it goes. I think to me, when you engage in it, when you read all the comms, like, we obviously had Ben come on and explain, it wasn't a 20-minute red card, but I guess a bit more about the process of how the shape of the game works.
Yeah.
It seems like a reasonable, measured response. But we shall see, because as he said in that interview, there's always unintended consequences of any decision.
For sure.
But they can't plan, or they won't predict.
But also, like you said, like the narrative that Australia and New Zealand just walked into World Rugby headquarters and were like, this is what we're doing, lads. And everybody got on board. It's like, there will be some truth to the idea. I mean, everyone is lobbying all the time.
Yeah, there'll be politicking, absolutely.
Yeah, every union is lobbying to get the things that they want. If you have a job where you can exert influence and you work for one of those unions, that's your responsibility. You have to be doing that. But the part that when people try and give you that, like, oh, this is all it is these two unions ruling the roost, they miss. Like, do you think Ben O'Keefe went to the Shape of the Game forum to just get dictated to by someone from those two unions? Like, no, of course he didn't. He went there to give his opinions, right? And to try and help build a better product. Yeah, as an expert, exactly. And that's what everybody was doing there. And when you see that kind of like, oh, this is just so and so and so and so trying to shape things, like, it doesn't quite cover the whole thing. You're missing a lot of nuances there. And, again, I appreciate. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, you go.
Oh,
you go.
Stalemate. Okay. I was just going to say, I appreciate that when you're putting stuff out there, you have to try and simplify it and streamline the message. But I definitely think we're all a bit guilty of, stripping the context away to try and make our
Yeah, and some of that context, I mean, I do it too, obviously, but I think some of the context, even, the threats to the game down here are very different to the threats to the game there. And so, a lot of people up north will go, well, not everyone wants to see running rugby. And that's true. Absolutely, right? There's not one way of playing this game, and that's what's beautiful about it. But, the threat to rugby down here is rugby league. And it is also probably AFL. And so if you're wanting to convert fans from there, potentially, they're used to a much faster game. So that's why that is what we're trying to push. But that doesn't make sense to people up north because it's not a threat to their game. So, of course, it's going to be very difficult when you're bringing, 12, 16 very stubborn unions all together to try and negotiate when a lot of the time what they each would benefit from doesn't benefit the other. So, I don't know. It's like international relations, but in sport, and it's
yeah.
Anyway, those are my thoughts. Nuance, as always, I guess.
Yeah, and you know what though? It's like, I think a lot of it as well is just, and this is purely from the perspective of you and I, and I'm interested to know if you feel the same way that I do. It's like part of doing content is you're always scrolling around, looking at what people are talking about, like trying to think of an idea for something that you could say. And then I think what happens to people, because I've noticed it happening a little bit to me, is you just consume too much of that stuff and you get too locked in and you think, oh, this is what everybody's talking about. When, like we said, it's not what everybody's talking about at all. Like it's what a small group of people are talking about. And I think you see it happening to like any media figures in rugby who have an online presence and have to try and get on board the content cycle. Like we were talking about the Johnny Sexton, Rico Ioane thing. Like every single podcast person had their Johnny Sexton, Rico Ioane clip, right? And like, yeah, you've got to be very careful not to get trapped in that cycle, I think.
Yeah, and I think I even learned that maybe from my first videos about the Owen Farrell thing, right? That was a news cycle and a half. Like that went for ages. And I think I have my own reflections on how I engaged in that, and it all went a lot bigger than I ever expected it to.
Didn't you get like 1 million views on one of those videos?
It was like 2. That was my first ever video. I don't know what. It was just zeitgeist. Like I was perfectly, when I posted it was like right at the right time. It was ridiculous.
You must have been freaking out.
Yeah, it was very weird. It was very weird. But anyway, I guess, I was someone who jumped on the bandwagon of what everyone was talking about, right? But then it kind of ate itself, it just like turns in on itself and becomes its own gnarly little thing. And I guess the Johnny Sexton, Rico Ioane thing kind of like, folded in on itself. And then all the brands got on. It was like, this isn't kind of exciting to talk about anymore.
I remember during that Owen Farrell thing, a few people would go after me in the comments being like, oh, it's just engagement. It's just free engagement. Everyone's talking about it. And it's like, it does make you wonder, like, are you, even though you're not saying anything that's completely out of line, are you contributing to like a negative reaction to something that doesn't warrant this much attention,
Or even not something that's, even if it's not necessarily negative or you don't think, it's still like part of that conversation.
Exactly. You're just a part of the big swirling. Yeah. And for the person on the other end of it, they just see the monolith. They don't really necessarily care about the nuances of your take, So, yeah, it's interesting. God, if I remember during the World Cup, the first time, let's say a couple of my videos would have hit. I mean, I never got 2 million, but I was freaking out when those hit. You must have been. You must have been like, what is this?
It was very weird. The whole thing was very weird. But that's like you say, a reflection on the content machine and your place in it. And it's nice to have a place like this where we can talk through things and kind of have a bit more of that nuance. But sometimes, the platform doesn't necessarily reward that. And I think the shorter the engagement, the content, more difficult it is.
Yeah, well, obviously the less you can squeeze in there. Okay, and speaking of, adversarial head-to-head content, what's the view in New Zealand on the stuff about France?
Oh,
of
people,
the tour in July.
yeah. People not happy. Let's be real. Like the general
Yeah.
public were like, "This is insulting," which of course they would be, because why would any Joe Blog Kiwi who loves the All Blacks watch France club rugby? You know, they don't
Yeah.
have much
Yeah.
understanding of the top 14, because that is at a ridiculous hour of the morning for us too. You know, so the understanding that, you know, the clubs and the club scene hold all the power and money in France is lost on us, because here it's all Blacks. That's it. They make all
Yeah.
the calls. They're the most important thing. So it's very foreign concept, I think, for people here.
Mm.
So yeah, people I think weren't happy, but when it was explained to them, maybe were like, okay, it makes sense, but still not happy about it. And I think it speaks so much to the difference in power structures, but also mentalities in countries, because people on the internet I saw who weren't from New Zealand were going, we'll just send a B team over to play their team.
Yeah.
And I was like, the All Blacks never in my wildest dreams do that. The day the All Blacks do that is the day it's done for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's disappointing, because I think as a fan of rugby, I would love to see those guys down here. Like I'll probably never have an opportunity to see Antoine Dupont play in real life otherwise. You know, so that's the disappointing part as a fan, but I think you can understand why it is the way that it is. And if we're harping on about player welfare so much, like I fully believe that, you know, head knocks, while a very important part of that, a lot of that conversation,
story, yeah.
I think, is around the length of the season, injuries, toll on bodies. And so, yeah, I understand it for sure.
100%. When I saw it, I remember just thinking, like, why was this organized if this was going to be such a big problem? Because I think it was quite foreseeable, you know?
Yes, they did it to Australia in 2021. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it was like
different.
Well, I wonder if it was because, you know, they relaxed the rules a little bit around the World Cup cycle. Like there was an agreement between the national union and the club organizations to say, like, well, we've got a home World Cup, we need more access to players around that. And I wonder if maybe everyone just settled into that new way of doing things and didn't think ahead to say, like, oh, this is going to go back to normal. We are going to go back to the old way.
I would love to see the back room, like the conversations that have happened between like NZRU and the French Rugby Union in the wake of this. It must be wild.
Yeah. I mean, we were saying this before, like the French coaches have been really open about this for a long time, about, like you said, a list of names of who wouldn't be going.
This came out in June. You and I both did videos in like June, so I'm not sure why this became a big story all of a sudden. But I can't imagine two nations of people with far different temperaments trying to speak in conflict over the phone through a time difference. It would be hilarious.
Yeah, I would watch that documentary for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, because there was potential, you know, the last team to ever beat the All Blacks at Eden Park was France in 1994. So, you know, there's a lot, and Romain Intermac's dad was playing in that game and played a part in the try from the end of the world, one of the most famous tries of all time. So, you know, there could have been some really great stuff out of that if someone like him was coming. And, you know, maybe that's also disappointing for French players. I'm sure Intermac's also been pretty open about like wanting to play Super Rugby. So he obviously has a bit about New Zealand rugby in his head. So it's probably disappointing for them too, but it's just the way the French cookie crumbles at the moment, unfortunately.
Croissant, maybe.
Croissant.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely with you. I reckon a lot of the players are probably quite disappointed around that, actually. I mean, do you think Dupont himself doesn't want to go and play a tour in New Zealand? I'm sure he does. But
well, if you ask Twitter, he personally
well, he's afraid, I mean, we talked about it before the recording, but his try assist from yesterday, that backdoor pass, God, you love to see it.
I think just as a person who wasn't, well, I was alive, but not really sentient, like didn't live really through Jonah, you know, it's cool to feel like we have a figure who is of a similar ilk, and you just get to watch freakish display of skill week on, week off.
One of the reasons I know all the debate around it is silly and he is amazing is like it gives you the same feels as it was watching Dan Carter. Like it's the same thing. It's like these guys who seem to have an extra second or 2 seconds compared to everyone else, and it seems like they're thinking several steps ahead of everyone else. Like, you know, I always bring this up. It must be so boring. Sorry, everybody. But that 2015 World Cup, that quarterfinal where you absolutely smashed France. I got to go to that game, and I was down in the corner where you had the perfect angle of his little out the back door offload and the perfect angle of the Sevilla tries and stuff. And I've just never seen someone look so comfortable as he did that day. Like, amazing stuff. And I've seen DuPont live once, and you get the same sort of feeling, you know, just playing a different game. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so jealous because I probably won't get to see him live either. So.
Yeah, it's crazy that if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you just won't.
No.
Yeah, it sucks.
Sucks for us. Sucks to suck.
Maybe with the Nations Championship, because there's talk that like France are going to be signed up to the tournament. Surely they're going to have to find a way to be able to play in that July window. Surely they're not going to throw those games if there's a new tournament on them. Maybe they will. As I'm saying it, I'm losing confidence.
The joy about French rugby is you just never freaking know.
You just don't know.
They would not care about doing that, I fear. The union anyway, but
yeah.
Huge. So I don't know. I think a bunch of disappointed Kiwis at the heart of it. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it. And also, though, I don't think we beat a French B team easily. You know, like they're a very good side currently.
Sometimes their B teams just pull it together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, I mean, they beat Argentina in the summer. You know.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a walk in the park.
Yeah.
So
they've got some great players. Like Baptiste Serran was playing 9 for them in that B team tour. They've got Nolan Legaric who can also play 9 for them. Like it's not like they don't have a deep player pool. Their player pool's massive, so plenty of talent.
Yeah, and it's still like we've got a whole another 12 months until that kind of happens, 8 to 10 months. So
yeah, huge. Just more people on the scene.
Oh, exactly. Like think of the people you always say it about how quickly things can change, and think of the players we talk about now as almost staples in the test arena who we didn't know about 3 months ago.
Yeah, I mean Mark Talia, I think is the best example. Like, I'm sure you guys were more aware of him, but in the Northern Hemisphere, basically none of us had ever heard of him before that World Cup, except maybe flashes. Then he's incredible in that Rugby Championship and World Cup, and we're all like, "Who is this guy?" And now he's not starting.
Oh, wild. It's very interesting to see whether he gets a start against Japan. Oh, how did I miss the big story that's kind of the New Zealand dominating story at the moment? Is obviously Hoskins Sotutu.
Coming to the Northern Hemisphere. Is he really coming to the Northern Hemisphere?
That's what we're hearing. This is the thing. I think wires have got crossed. So we'll take it back. He got named in the All Blacks 15 to travel to the Northern Hemisphere. Then on whatever day it was this week, rumors start swirling that the man was injured. And then I think the conspiracy people, I don't mean conspiracy people, but certain people.
I know what you mean.
Were saying fake injury, he's going to change his eligibility. And not travel with the All Blacks 15. But my understanding is that the All Blacks 15 maybe isn't a catchment team anymore for eligibility, so it wouldn't have changed anything if he'd played for them. And what's he going to do? But I suppose the Prem started. But it sounds like then I was pretty confident the injury was real because I'd seen a Reddit comment saying that someone had been to physio and Hoskins was there hobbling around. Very New Zealand thing to have happened.
That is some research, by the way.
Yeah, I saw it before the rumors came out too. So I was like, nah, this is real. Okay. And then, so he pulled out. Then at the All Blacks press conference, Razor said we were going to bring Hoskins in, but he's injured. Based on scans, he won't be able to travel with us. But he did say that he hasn't had any conversations with him about his eligibility. Obviously, he's eligible for both Fiji and England. I think it would be really silly of him to go to England. I don't think he walks into the England team by any means. Not as like I love him as a player, but the English back row are stacked.
Yeah.
Stacked. And it's a very different style of play.
Yeah. And I also think it's not. I know they do it sometimes, but from what I understand, the policy is to try and get away from capping international qualified players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, I mean, I'm not saying that he couldn't end up changing his eligibility, but I don't think this is the moment where it happens. And he probably wants to enjoy his off season because he's obviously been under a heap of scrutiny and media attention this year. So we shall see. But yeah, it's been a big story.
Okay, that's good to get the actual inside track on that. Because when I saw the stories, I was like, why? Like, it's the wrong time. Like, why would he be suddenly going somewhere now? And also, if he's going anywhere, he's going to France, right? He's not going to England.
Yeah, that would be the smart move. Just go and make a heck ton of money.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do he's a little bit older, but seen crazier things have happened. But, like Lester Fainga'anuku just re-signed with the Crusaders after 2 years at Toulon. Like, he's a bit younger. He's like 23. But still, there's plenty of avenues. And he's a good enough player. Like, he could get back there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and you're only ever one injury away, Proof, like probably Jacobson potentially not able to go on the tour. He was the next cab off the rank. Razor said so, but he couldn't. So we'll see what happens. I guess watch this space as always.
Okay, we've
done an hour.
I think we've covered it all that we talked about beforehand.
I think so.
Pretty rare we manage a full hour. That's pretty good going.
Look at us. We had a fair bit banked up, to be fair.
Yeah, we did. That's true. I guess that's the benefit of taking a few weeks off. Anything to plug? Anything going on?
No, just the same old. We're on the grind. We are on the grind, and we're back on the YouTube grind. So
we are. We will be back.
Subscribe.
And November tour, obviously a good chance for us to get into the north-south divide.
Where else are you going to get a Kiwi and an Irishman in the same place? Just here at Coast to Coast.
Precisely. Right? This is the only place. All right. Well,
all right.
I'll let you get back to your evening. I'll start my day.
Time zones, hey? Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.